two hostage takers, the terrorists. He hid himself, we believe, in a box. When this happened, the terrorist suspects decided to take on the authorities. And when they did, their day ended very quickly. It was very different in the grocery store, in the kosher grocery. There, this man of African descent that you had up there, that earlier in the day French authorities had released his picture and his name as a suspect in the killing of a French police officer, a female, yesterday, and the shooting of a second. He and his alleged accomplice, who is his girlfriend, who's also pictured. They then, at least the man, we don't know about the woman, but we do know that the man walked into this kosher grocery, announced to people there, "You know who I am," and then took hostages. We're not sure how many. We believe that children were involved. So what happened there was that French authorities observed the man going into what they thought was a prayer or a preparation for some violent action of his own accord, because they had just seen the two brothers attacking authorities. That's what initiated the assault. They used flashbangs, which you know, Wolf, for everybody else. There's a big blast of light. They're disorienting. They're a diversion. And then they went in. And it was very difficult there. I want to bring in Holodrama. You've been with me all day watching this. That kosher grocery, much tougher for authorities. The industrial park, big, lots of points of ingress and egress, two people, only one hostage. Here, they only had one way in. We watched them struggling to get in. We were told it was very violent. We can only imagine what was going on inside.
And you were talking about that industrial zone situation. Some reports are suggesting that that hostage may not even have been necessarily known to the two terrorists, that they might not even have known that they had a hostage. Authorities, of course, knew there was that individual inside, but whether or not they knew that he was a bargaining chip, quote unquote, if you will, is unclear at this stage. Regarding the kosher supermarket, there were, the question there, of course, is what happened in terms of loss of life among hostages. There are these
we know hostages lost their lives, we know others were injured, but we don't know the numbers.
Exactly, and the reason we know that for sure is that the Minister of Interior came out, spoke to reporters, and said he was saddened by the loss of life, including among hostages. So at this stage, we can confirm that. We cannot confirm the number. Numbers are out there unless we have an accurate and definitive figure. We don't want to communicate it, but we know that initially, in the first few minutes after the end of these operations, there was this sense that perhaps it was completely, quote-unquote, clean, in the sense that only the terrorists had been killed. But it does appear, sadly, as though perhaps some hostages died as well.
We also don't know, which is a very important note, whether or not hostages lost their lives in the assault or before. We also know some have been injured there when we saw triage set up. We also know that first responders, French SWAT team members, they were also injured. We don't know the degree to which. But we do have people at both scenes. And let's rely on that advantage right now. We'll start with Jim Sciutto. You are at the kosher grocery. You watched it all as it went down. You've gotten to move very close now. What do you assess in terms of how difficult this assault was and what happened inside in terms of the results for the hostages?
Chris, we were here as this raid unfolded. Several moments, electrifying moments, riveting, very nervous moments here as we heard those first explosions, rounds of gunfire, and then a few minutes later, more rounds of gunfire. An indication, as you have said, that this was a more difficult operation because of those circumstances inside. I want to play a clip of video as we were on the air live when those gunshots rang out here. It gives you a real sense of just the tension in those early moments.
Mais là, il y a des grenades aussi, des grenades multibanques lancées, aveuglantes, voilà, aveuglantes, assourdissantes. Là, qui, c'est des... Mais là, il y a des grenades aussi, des grenades multibanques lancées, aveuglantes, voilà, aveuglantes, assourdissantes. Là, qui, c'est des...
I'll tell you, Chris, you and I have both been in Iraq, we've been in Afghanistan, and as I was standing here on a street in downtown Paris, the capital of France, heard that gunfire, heard those explosions, it reminds me of Baghdad, it reminds me of Kabul, certainly not sounds I expected to hear here. As you'll remember, This raid unfolded a number of minutes after the raid northeast of Paris. Clearly, the tactical units that we have seen here all morning and early afternoon lining up surrounding this kosher market, choosing to move in after the raid had ended, been resolved northeast of Paris, concerned, of course, about the safety of the hostages inside. Another thing I'll say is that from the very moment we arrived here this morning, a number of hours before this raid took place, that there were clear signs that there were casualties. As we drove here, we saw ambulances going away. I saw someone on a stretcher being taken into an ambulance. We counted 3 or 4 leaving the scene under police escort. That was a number of hours before the raid started. And then after that raid started, we saw 5, 6 ambulances rushing there, emergency workers crossing that highway bridge behind me there, going in as those tactical units